Bill Maher's panel had a really great debate on the crimes of ISIS versus the crimes of the U.S. Let's watch.
We should also be showing the atrocities that are committed by my government and your government, and by the Saudi regime, which we support, arm and fund every day.
Speaking of all the horror that we have, these beheadings, this is what war is. I wish we had felt more of this horror in a more sober thinking about whether or not to even go into a war. These atrocities happen every day, and some of them happen from...
Well, I mean...
We punish our war crimes. There's nothing remotely comparable to the kind of...
Henry Kissinger is a lauded and revered person and one of the worst criminals in the United States. You don't punish your war criminals, I'm afraid, but...
Well, I disagree with the war. He's not a war criminal. He didn't go out intentionally
well, you want to talk to the people of Chile about that, but the... I interviewed... It relates to what you were saying, because I interviewed a lot of former jihadis in Britain who'd become jihadists and had stopped, and it was very interesting. Overwhelmingly, they became jihadis when our governments were committing atrocities against their people, and they stopped because ordinary Western people were decent and kind to them, and they thought, I can't support attacking these people. The more aggressive we are... There's some jihadism, you're totally right, that is just spontaneous, vile religious mania, right? That's real, that exists. The more aggressive and abusive we are in response, the more that grows. The more we show ourselves to be good and loving and decent people, the more it diminishes. We've got to look at the evidence.
And that's why the drone strike. That's why the drone strike.
I mean, it's obvious that America has also burned people alive from the air. I mean, in World War II... But, you know, I mean, World War II wasn't...
Not just World War II, the drone attacks on Pakistan are incinerating children all the time, you know. And that's the current President Obama.
It is a little different. It is a little different.
I mean,
you know,
a guy in a cage,
collateral damage is a little...
Burning him to death.
That's right. The collateral damage is a different...
That's the line that separates the barbarians.
Which, you know, Jeremy Scahill, one of your
world.
former guests, has documented. That's pretty atrocious, and that was done by
America is
Obama.
certainly not guilt-free, but I don't think we're the moral equivalent of ISIS. No, I don't.
I don't think he's saying that.
There are crimes committed in peace, there are crimes committed in war, but we go to our utmost to try and minimize those casualties. That's, I mean, there have been Americans...
Well, not always.
In Afghanistan, the rules of engagement were written in such a way that there are American men who are dead today because they followed in attempts to protect civilian lives.
At the end of World War II, before we dropped the atom bomb, we wiped out from 50 to 90% of the population of Japan's biggest 60 cities. That's some serious shit.
Yeah, that's a really good point at the end there. People hate having this conversation because viscerally something feels wrong about comparing America to ISIS. But they stumbled on some great points there. So, is there a difference qualitatively between the crimes of ISIS and the crimes of America? Well, absolutely. I don't think anybody would deny that. I mean, there's something that just looks and feels way worse about religious thugs marauding their way through the desert to literally rape and pillage and burn people alive and behead people and do jihad and put heads on stakes, as we've seen in Syria and in other places. So qualitatively, I would say that ISIS is way worse. And I think that most people would admit that. But quantitatively, though, this is where people start to feel like, ooh, I don't want to touch that conversation because it's politically incorrect. Yeah, but quantitatively, it's a fact that America has killed more innocent people. We just have. Again, you could try to deny that, but it's the reality. But here's the breakdown, because it is a much more complicated picture even than just that, what we've went through already. Most American violence is done in the name of imperialism or nationalism or greed. We often talk about the military-industrial complex and about how that plays a role in the decisions that are made, or it's more of a byproduct of this world policeman mindset that the American government has. And here's the big difference, though, that they're alluding to there in the conversation, and I think it's important to bring this up. Most of the time when the U.S. is killing innocent people, most of the time, although there are exceptions, it's more manslaughter than murder. You see what I mean? And look, Bill's point was fairly devastating at the end there because he's pointing to a case where it wasn't manslaughter, it was outright murder, and it was war crimes when, you know, you just firebomb innocent civilians. I mean, we dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japanese cities that were jam-packed full of civilians, and they did it seemingly as if it was nothing. Truman was very flippant about the whole situation. So sometimes it is outright murder and it is outright killing civilians. A lot of the covert operations done in South America and in other places, it is just outright cold-blooded murder and killing civilians and not caring about the consequences. Although if you look in the Middle East, and if you look in, so let's break it down more specifically, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, if you look in those places, I think it is more just flat-out incompetence, and it is more trying to avoid civilian casualties but failing miserably. So it is the difference between manslaughter and murder. Now, a lot of people think that just excuses, like the Bill O'Reilly conservative school of thought is, well, that just excuses everything that America did. No, it doesn't. You know, manslaughter and murder, those both get you a lot of time in jail if we're talking about your average citizen doing it. They're both serious crimes, one a little less severe in terms of the punishment, but they're both very serious, and they both end in the same result with people being killed. So that's not an excuse. Try to explain that to an Iraqi mother who lost 3 sons because of the American invasion of Iraq. Try to explain to her, hey, it's cool because we meant well. That argument just doesn't carry weight with anybody else in the world except Americans who are already inclined to try to be kinder to the American government because they are American. So they just feel like, well, we can let it slide because we do mean well. But the reason why Americans should talk more about American crimes than the crimes of ISIS is that we control our own actions. We control it. So we are responsible for the bad that we do around the world. I mean, this is the point Chomsky makes all the time when he says, if you're really concerned about stopping terrorism around the world, there's an easy way. Stop participating in it. I'm not responsible for Mohammed Abdullah, Mr. X member of ISIS, when he's marauding through the desert doing fucked up shit. But I am responsible when it's my tax dollars going to a predator drone that blow up a funeral or a wedding procession. I am responsible when our tax dollars pay for planes that are bombing and missing their targets oftentimes. So that's why we should talk more about what we do than what they do. But understand that this in no way excuses the ISIS violence. And it's not true that all of the ISIS violence is because of big bad America. It's certainly true that we have contributed to the growth of groups like al-qaeda and ISIS and all the different jihadist organizations around the world. We have given them a better argument because they get to turn to disaffected young Muslim men and say, hey, the Americans killed your uncle, so you want an AK-47 and join us to defend your country? Then they say, yeah. We've given them an argument, a better argument, and that's increased recruitment. But the virus exists either way, the virus of fundamentalism and the virus of extremely ultra-Orthodox Islam that just says slaughter the infidel and show no mercy towards them. So again, when you look at American violence, today it's more manslaughter than murder, and it's done more in the name of imperialism, nationalism, and greed. But ISIS violence, when you look at that, it's more done in the name of religion, and it's also done because of retribution for crimes against the Middle East. And that's more murder than manslaughter, if you want to break that aspect down of it as well, because of what they're doing to civilians in Syria and in Iraq and in other places. That's more, no, if we think you're against us, you're donezo, and that's the end of the conversation. There's no accidentally lighting a Jordanian pilot on fire or beheading somebody. So I think the best way to approach these situations and debate these things and discuss these things is to not be afraid of the conclusions that you have to draw in many respects, and to try to be as specific and break it down in as many different categories as possible where we can really compare apples to apples. So they all made a lot of great points on that panel.